So when running Etsy ads, it can be really frustrating. But if you understand how they work, it can be really, really a huge game changer for you. And what I wanted to do here is, well, I wanted to distill down what we just went through. Chris Schaefer and I, we just went for 44 minutes on a live stream and we shared exactly what you need to understand and how it really truly works and how you can benefit from it. And what I'm going to do is have my good friend Chris Schaefer, also my little AI engine, because he's got really, really smart brain up there. He's going to translate all of that we just covered in a very short period of time so we can do a little recap here. So Chris, take it away, buddy.
Scott, one question you and I get all the time, and this is really where this topic came out of, and it's not really a question, it's usually a response to us talking about how much we love Etsy ads, is Etsy ads don't work. And if you're thinking that, I'm going to tell you right now, you're wrong. And the reason that you're wrong is probably just because you don't understand what you're missing in this picture. And quite frankly, Scott, most Etsy sellers are using Etsy ads wrong. And that's why they are failing. Look, ads, like anything else, are just a traffic source. They're only as good as what we put into it, right? And I'm not talking specifically about budget here. But the first thing people need to understand with Etsy ads is the reason you and I love them, above the fact that it can help us generate sales and all of those kinds of things, is it's a shortcut way for us to understand what the algorithm is looking at. What happens when we show for a certain keyword? Do people click on it? Do they not? If they don't, and they're not clicking on the ad, they're not going to click on it when we show up there organically either, right? If they're clicking on it and they're not buying, guess what's not going to happen if we show up on the organic side? We're not going to get the sales. And so the first thing, the foundational thing I think that most Etsy sellers get wrong, Scott, about Etsy ads is that it's a great way to shortcut what the Etsy algorithm thinks about your listing and what buyers think about your listing, which is really coming closer to be one and the same thing. And so if we use that as our foundation, then any sales we get on the back end of that, any profitability we get on the back end of that is just gravy for us. And I know you recently posted a screenshot from inside our ads where we had like a 300% increase in revenue from Etsy ads over the last 30 days. And we spent a couple $100. I think it was just under $900. And we made $300 or a little over $3,000 in sales. Correct my math on that on the fly here, just under. So it was 889, there's the numbers, and 2957 in revenue, which is a 3.3 and change. Nobody needs to get into the decimals. This isn't a math class. Return on ad spend, meaning for every dollar we spent on ads, we made $3.30. There he is, bringing in the screenshot for me, right? And so at that surface level, that actually is profitable for us. Now, the like golden benchmark, Scott, for return on ad spend is that 4-to-1 mark. We're just underneath that right now at 3.3, but we're okay with that because we are profitable here. Most businesses, if you can get a business to a 4-to-1 return on ad spend, can scale that infinitely, meaning we can light as much money on fire as we want, and we know we're going to get that back, and it's going to be profitable for us. This is the second area, I think, where people get caught up because they think Etsy ads have to be immediately profitable. I'm going to put $5 on Etsy ads, and I'm immediately going to start making sales, and that's going to be the end of it. So they run a few dollars in ads, or they run ads for a few days, and one of a few different things can happen. Either they're not getting any clicks at all, and then they throw up their hands and they say, Etsy ads don't work. No one's clicking on my ad. What was the point of that? I didn't spend any money, but they don't work. It didn't drive any traffic. Or they're getting clicks and no sales. Or they're getting clicks and a few sales here and there, but not enough to get anywhere close to that golden benchmark of that 4-to-1 return on ad spend. And instead of saying Etsy ads don't work, the better way of thinking about this is, why don't Etsy ads work for me? And there's a few different things that I wanted to run through here very quickly. The first is, if you're running Etsy ads and no one is clicking, you have a listing problem. The very first thing you need to do is not turn off Etsy ads. It's re-go through the demand evaluation process. You need to understand first, is anybody actually even looking for this? And if they are, then why aren't they clicking? If you're getting a lot of impressions and no clicks, you have an issue with your main image or potentially with your title. So focus on that area. Make those changes and then come back in a week and tell me that Etsy ads don't work, right? If we start to play around with those things, we'll go from having impressions and no clicks to impressions and clicks. That gets us one step further down the road. once we start getting those clicks, where people say Etsy ads don't work, Scott, is they'll say, you can't get people to convert from Etsy ads. They just don't do it. Well, first of all, hate to break it to y'all, consumers don't know the difference between clicking on an ad in an Etsy search result and clicking on a standard result, which is why every time somebody asks me, hey, I'm number one in search, should I still run ads? The answer is yeah, because you're getting more of the click share in the mind of the consumer. We as sellers know, and we actually look for ads on pages. 99.9% of people don't know the difference. So the buying behavior there isn't really any different. And remember that foundational thing I talked about a minute ago where I said, hey, if you understand that we're using this to get a better idea of how the algorithm and how consumers are looking at our listing, then that's the foundation we need to understand. This is where that really comes into play. If you're getting clicks and no sales, it means people think your listing is relevant. And when they get there, it's not relevant enough for them to convert. That doesn't mean you have an Etsy ads problem. That means you either have a relevance problem, meaning you're showing up for keywords that you probably shouldn't be showing up for, or it doesn't perfectly match the customer expectation, or you have a conversion rate problem. It's not the fault of Etsy ads that your listing doesn't sell. It's the fault of the listing, right? And if we're going through and we're making sure that the keywords are relevant, and we know that it's not a relevance issue because the keyword makes sense with the listing itself, then we have nothing more to blame than the listing itself. And that's it's really hard to blame ourselves. It's a lot easier to say it's Etsy ads fault. They send junk traffic. It must be just my competitors eating up my click budget, which is a thing I hear all the time. It's not. People clicking on those ads are real people. They don't know the difference between the organic and the ads in the vast majority of cases. What that tells you is not that ads don't work, because the ads job is just to get you the traffic. It's that your listing is not working. So if you're not getting anybody to buy, we need to double check those keywords, make sure that they're relevant, and then focus on the conversion side of this. And this, Scott, I think is something that a huge number of people miss out on, because it's too hard if you're launching a million listings to go in and conversion optimize all of those listings. It's too hard if you're chasing the trends to go back and retake your photos or think about a better way to phrase your title or to rewrite that product description, because you have to be in that launch cycle. And this, I think, is where a lot of people get messed up. If you're using that model on Etsy and you're not using the niche-based approach that you and I rant and rave and scream about all of the time, it's a lot harder to think through those processes and to care enough to say, hey, I have a listing problem. I don't have an Etsy ads problem, right? And if we can start thinking about it that way, then we can fix any of those problems. We can start to increase the number of people who click if we're not getting clicks. We can start to increase the number of people who buy when they come to that listing. What does that mean? It means we get more sales. What does that mean? It means we get more sales on the organic side as well. And I think the other thing, Scott, before I get off my high horse about Etsy ads aren't wrong, you're wrong, is the last check in this equation is, okay, yeah, like I'm getting sales, right? I'm getting some people to come in, I'm getting clicks. It's working, but it's not profitable enough. I'm only making $30 or I'm only making $5 on the sale. Okay, that's still not an Etsy ads problem. That's a marketing and creativity problem, right? What is the number one thing that we can do to increase our margins? Well, we can increase our price. That helps. But the easiest thing to do in terms of increasing sales and increasing margins is to sell more to the same customer that we've sold to in the past. And Etsy buyers who have purchased from you in the past are extremely likely to buy from you again and again. Now, with the caveat that you're using that niche-based approach so that when they come to the store, they don't just get bombarded with corn nuts and cornhole. They get to see the dancing avocado merchandise that they're so used to seeing, right? But if we're using that niche-based approach, even if our ads are not rambunctiously, that's the wrong word, right? Wildly profitable up front, we can make them largely profitable on the back end. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, Scott, that people should just light Etsy ads money on fire. I don't think you would agree with that approach either. But I will say,
No.
you don't have an Etsy ads problem. You have a you problem. When I say you, I don't mean you personally. I mean your store. There's something wrong along the way, which is the reason that your ads are not working. So quite honestly, Scott, anybody that tells me that Etsy ads don't work, I have to start with the premise that they're just missing something. And it's not that you're too silly to understand it. It's not that it doesn't work for your product type. It's just that you might have to think about this a little bit differently. Have you gone through and verified that people are looking for your product? you're not getting any clicks. That's a huge mistake we see people make. We've done a lot of Etsy shop audits, Scott. They say, I'm running ads, I'm not getting any clicks. You look at it, they're getting only a handful of impressions. What does that immediately tell us? No one's looking for that product. Putting $100 or $1 million a day budget on that on Etsy, not going to help us along the way, right? If we know that there's demand and we're not getting the clicks, then we don't have a problem with Etsy ads. We have a problem getting the attention of our buyers. We need to focus on solving that problem. And if we can double down on thinking about the problem that we need to solve, and instead of saying Etsy ads don't work, we change that to say, why don't Etsy ads work for me? It will take our store from struggling to profit.